It all started with a very simple idea: tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, my guest is Elliott Hyman, CEO of Lyra Technology Group. Elliott previously worked as Wolf Consulting CEO and Director of Business Development, as well as Chairman of Tech Keys. Prior to joining Wolf Consulting, he held a diverse set of management roles with McMaster-Carr, a leading industrial supplier, and began his career working as a special education teacher with Teach for America. Elliott earned a bachelor's degree in U.S. history from Vanderbilt University and an MBA from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. Outside of work, Elliott enjoys spending time with his family, rooting for the New York Jets, and reading about history, technology, and business. Elliott Hyman, welcome into the corner office.
Thanks for having me, Brant. Really appreciate it.
Great to chat with you again. It's been a while since we first connected, so great we could find some time on a somewhat cold New York afternoon. It's getting a little chilly in the city here. What part of the country we find you in today?
I'm at home in Chicago, and we actually had our first snow of the year today. So winter is coming. Yeah.
Winter is definitely upon us. Well, you'd mentioned to me that your mom lives in Manhattan. Did you grow up here, or what part of the country are you from originally?
Yeah, I grew up in a town called Roslyn, which is
Uh-huh.
25 miles east of Manhattan on Long Island. You can always
Right.
tell a real Long Islander because they say on Long Island and not in Long
Right.
Island.
And
Yeah,
brothers
so
and sisters, are big family, small family? What did mom and dad do? Tell us a little bit about your early life.
yeah, so I have a sister. She's a few years younger than me. She also lives in Manhattan, and she's actually in the sort of fashion and makeup industry.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and uh, parents, both actually entrepreneurs. So
Oh,
grew up around a lot of conversations about business and
yeah.
customers and small business kind of mindset.
What kind of entrepreneurs were they? What trade were they in?
Yeah, my father was a clothing manufacturer and
Okay.
then got into sort of small business M&A. And then my mother was an interior designer.
Yeah, cool. Excellent. And grew up in Long Island the whole time, or did you move into the city at some point?
So I was actually born in the city, and then
Okay.
my parents made the pilgrimage that a lot of folks do out to the
Right.
suburbs when to get us into schools and a little more space to play outside in the grass. My mother tells the story of walking down, a busy Manhattan street with me, and it was when I just started walking, and she was, and people are kind of shuffling by quickly as they do in Manhattan, and she sort of got this panic and said, "Okay, it's time," and agreed to move to the suburbs.
Move out. Get that grassy lawn. Any things that you recall from your childhood? Things that mom and dad did, or you'd mentioned they were both entrepreneurs. Were there some business discussions around the table? Is that kind of part of what you remember growing up?
Always, always. Yeah. Well, when you're a small business owner,
Yeah.
and this is what I've learned in the work that we do as well. It's not just your job; it's just who you are, and it's part of your life. So
Right.
we were always talking about business around the dinner table. We ate dinner together every night, and my father always made a point to kind of teach me about small business. And I remember we'd go out to dinner when I was a kid, and we would do sort of a back of the envelope calculation on, how many tables they had, what the average bill was, how many tables, how many times they turned those tables a night. He was always sort
Ah,
of interested in
cool.
those things, and we talk about those things. Yeah.
Did you pursue some entrepreneurial things when you were a kid?
I wasn't one of these kids, and you hear these stories. Warren Buffett has the famous sort of paper route where
Right.
early
Right.
on he's looking to make nickels or whatever it is. That wasn't really. I didn't really do that. I did. I think probably the earliest indication for what I ended up, kind of getting into was I would, play a lot of sports video games as a kid, and
Right.
a lot of kids do, right? And uh, but what I was really interested in was the management mode where you'd
Ah,
sort of manage the salary cap and trade players and build a
Moneyball.
multi-year plan. Exactly, very much into Moneyball. Exactly right. That was
Figuring out
much
the
more
right
my
trades and
interest.
such.
That's right. Yeah, that was much more my
Cool.
interest.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Were you a good student in school?
I was probably a B plus student. I'm not,
Okay.
so proud to say. But I was really not. I wasn't great at what I'd consider sort of playing the game of school.
Yeah.
If I was interested in a subject, I got really into it and might go read, beyond what sort of was taught in the class about those things, history, um, economics. I was pretty into, um, math. I liked math a lot, but I was if science, and I was a French student. My for 10 years, and I ended up getting an opportunity to go to France.
Awesome.
Probably in college, and I tried to speak French and they just laughed at me. So if I wasn't interested in it, I wasn't very good, and that's not the best strategy for being a straight A student.
Right. Right. What about other activities other than your sports gaming? Did you play
Yeah.
actually any sports or other debate or theater or anything else you did in high school, junior high?
Yeah. I played a lot of sports, through the first year, probably the first year of high school, um, and was sort of on, football, basketball, baseball, and I got to that point where the it was sort of becoming clear who was going to be really good, and then there was me, who was sort of the last guy on the bench, and I got tired of that, so I uh, stopped playing high school sports, switched to student government and
Yeah.
debate. Got pretty into that, through the rest of high school.
Debate's great. I did that in high school and college as well, and it not only teaches you how to speak, but teaches you how to think, right? Representing two different sides on, one equation. Did you do kind of go through that realm as well? And gosh, I remember what was it? The death penalty and lots of things that you would have to take one side or the other on. Did you do that type of debate?
I did. I
Yeah.
was I was into Model Congress, which
Oh,
is
cool.
exactly that, where you sort
Yeah.
of, put, there's a bill that you have to, debate against
Right.
against
Right.
another student, and yeah, it was great because one, it was an opportunity to use some of the things that I was curious about, and talk about it, and two, it teaches you to sort of think on the fly and talk on the
Right.
fly and try to
Yeah.
sound like you know what you're talking about, which is a pretty useful skill in life, I found.
There's something about really being able to debate both sides of a subject too. Later on in business life, we probably both have had bosses where that they agreed with you, right? But they took the alternate position just to kind of test your mettle and determine whether or not, you were going to stand up for what you believed in. Did you experience that at all?
I've uh, there's been many folks that I've worked for or with throughout my career that, one of the things that I learned in my earliest management experiences, was the value of questions.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and a lot of times, many of my sort of early mentors and managers, they wouldn't state their opinion. I don't know where this was sort of learned in the organization, but they would sort of pose it as a question, whether it was
Hmm.
to test you or just um, you know, uh, to get you to kind of come to the answer yourself.
Right.
And I've
Right.
I've used that a lot. I love that approach because, especially now as I'm managing folks, it's like, gosh, there's times uh, where I might have just not thought of something, and rather than put myself out there, it's great because then you say, oh, hey, that was a great answer. Maybe that's what I should think.
Right, right. Awesome. I know you went under Vanderbilt, and before we get
hmm
to that, jobs that you had, did you have jobs in high school, junior high? Was that kind of part of what you did growing up in Long Island, and set aside a little money for some things that you love to enjoy, or perhaps even college?
Yeah, I had a few jobs growing up. Um, I spent a couple of summers as a summer camp counselor,
Ah, cool.
which was interesting.
Yeah. Where was that? What part of the state or country was that in?
It was actually it was on Long Island. It
Oh,
was
Long Island.
day
Yeah.
camp. I was a day
Right.
camp
Yeah.
counselor,
Yeah.
and uh, great preparation. Not maybe in some ways for my career, but certainly for now being a parent, just realizing how exhausting children are to watch.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
and actually, probably the most interesting job I had was so. Um, at that time there were sort of two epicenters of the subprime mortgage um, industry,
World.
and,
Yeah.
and one yes, and one was Southern California,
Yeah.
and one was Long Island, and
Yeah.
so we had a um, my mother actually had a client whose husband had started a business. Now they weren't calling them subprime mortgages then; they were
Right.
finance businesses.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right. Right.
so,
Right. Right.
um, so she kind of said, "Hey, my client, they're looking for people at their finance business, and you don't need any qualifications, and you can be whatever I was, 17, and
Right.
so I took the job, and I ended up doing cold calling to folks for subprime mortgages,
Wow. Cool. And this was in high
right
school.
before. Yeah, this was in high school,
Yeah.
right before the financial crisis.
Wow.
And so when that all sort of came about, and subprime mortgages were sort of the main culprit, it was a really interesting experience to reflect on,
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
who I was calling, what we were telling them, getting loans for people. I remember there was I'm not going to say the name because uh, but there was a department that would sort of fix up your credit to be able to qualify
Mm.
for certain loans. And I would just
Right.
thought that was strange,
Yeah.
that if you don't qualify, we're going to sort of help you, fix up your credit to qualify. I was like, that doesn't
Couldn't
seem
give the money
quite
away.
right.
Right. Yeah.
That is exactly right. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly right.
Gosh. Well, on to Vanderbilt, great school, and you studied U.S. history. What was that your first choice? Did you take a look at a bunch of different universities? What made you choose to go there?
I did, I looked at a lot of different places, and I ended up getting the chance to visit Vanderbilt, and just, for anyone who happens to be listening to this, who spent a spring day at Vanderbilt, you'd understand that
Oh,
it's,
beautiful.
probably
Yeah.
one of the most beautiful campuses.
Yeah.
I think a little
Yeah.
biased,
Yeah.
but people were outside and having fun, and there was sort of this big concert that they put on every year happened to be going on that weekend, and I just sort of immediately said, this is where I want to go.
Yeah. Awesome. And did your 4 years there, and did you go straight on to Kellogg for your MBA afterwards, or did you work in between?
Yeah, so actually after undergrad, I joined Teach for America, which is a teaching program, places people without education, um, backgrounds, or degrees into some of the more challenging places to place and find teachers.
Awesome. Yeah. Is it a non-for-profit, or do they operate as a for-profit service?
Yeah, no, it's a not for profit.
Uh-huh.
It's a not for profit. So through them, I ended up teaching on the west side of Chicago, which has now become home for me.
Yeah.
I
Cool.
yeah I
And
taught.
then go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. No, I was going to say I taught special education, for
Yeah.
high school students on the west side.
Yeah. Awesome. And then did you go on to Kellogg after that, or was that after you, while you were at McMaster-Carr? McMaster-Carr.
Yeah, so after I was done teaching, I was looking for, the thing about teaching that I loved and I thought it was a great experience was I was 22 years old. I had just come out of college, and you get thrown into this classroom, and I always tell people, when you're there in front of the students, you better be an adult real quick, because if you're not, you
Right.
don't want to know who will be, right? I mean, you have to kind of take charge, and so
Kind of
it
back to
was
your
a
CAP
really
counseling days, right? I mean, same sort of
a,
thing.
right, exactly. So you kind of have to grow up and be ready to take charge of a group of people. In that case, the students, and so I knew I wanted to get into, business was always an interest for me, given sort of my experience growing up with my parents being entrepreneurs, and so I got an opportunity to go to McMaster-Carr, which was really interesting because when they called me, I was on my lunch break as a teacher between, periods, classes, and sort of eating my salad or whatever I had that day, and they called me and they said, hi, it's McMaster-Carr, we'd like to talk to you about a job opportunity. And I thought it was MasterCard, and I thought that was great because, I've heard of MasterCard.
Right,
um,
right.
and I found out who it actually was, and what interests me was they kind of said, hey, we take people who don't have, you know management experience, sometimes undergrads, sometimes people like me, and if they do a good job, you can be in a managerial role with supervisory responsibility really quickly.
Yeah,
And so that really appealed to me, with, having kind of felt like I was the master of my domain for the last 2 years
right.
as a teacher,
Yeah.
and took that, and then they actually sponsored for me to attend Kellogg, so
Go to
I went
Kellogg.
to
Awesome.
Kellogg in the evenings while I was working there.
So I assume that's where you first started managing people then at McMaster-Carr, correct?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. Tell us about that experience.
Oh gosh. So I was 24 years old. I spent 6 months there working in, so it's an industrial distribution business. And I was hired into their management rotation program, and I spent the first 6 months working in their warehouse. So, I've never been in a warehouse like that, or
Yeah,
really a warehouse at all. And it's a million square foot warehouse or something like
right.
that. And I was working in our order assembly department, which is essentially, taking, an order, and the whatever products were ordered would sort of get delivered to this part of the warehouse. Then we'd put them in one box, stick a label on it, and send it on its way. And then did that for 6 months, and then was given my first supervisory job in a totally different part of the business, in the merchandising department. I
Mm,
had a team of 7 working for me, and I remember when I got they kind of sat me down and said, "This is your next assignment, and this is your responsibilities, and here's your roster." And I looked down the roster, and there was an employee who I was now supposed to manage, who had, they sort of have data hire on this roster, and the
right,
data hire
right.
was 2 months before I was born. So,
Wow.
she had
You've
been
been
in
there over
this
24
job,
years.
right? She'd been in that job longer than I'd been alive, and
Wow.
I sort of panicked and thought, oh my gosh, how am I possibly going to do this?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was my introduction to management.
How did you do it?
You know, I I I had really good mentors at the
Mm,
company,
yeah.
um, and they helped a lot. And then I think, the thing that I learned, and this has kind of been the case throughout my career, because I've kind of, joke I've never gotten a job that I was qualified or prepared for. And and what I did was I talked to the people in the department, and I said, hey, what should I do? What should we do? And tried to kind of bring whatever perspective or skills I could bring to that, but really just ask people what they thought, and
Mm,
really listen to people, and then did they what they said we should do. It was kind of a cheat code that I found, was just ask
yeah.
people what you should do, and go do it.
Right, right. Awesome. What other kind of leadership lessons did you get out of that first job managing people?
I think just operating with a lot of humility.
Mm,
Um, it's one of the great things about working in a place like that. And there's a lot of places, maybe not as many as there should be, but there's a lot of places that uh, give early career people an opportunity to manage. And what I thought was really great was I had a lot of peers who were having similar experiences, and I got to, not only talk to them about what they were doing, and I'm a shameless copier and stealer of good ideas, um, but also see what worked and what didn't work. Because you got to see a lot of examples of folks doing that, and what I found worked was just a lot of humility, and asking people what they thought, and not feeling like, hey, the one of the biggest missteps I've seen throughout my career is, people get into some sort of position of, air quotes, authority, and they feel like they have to act like they're in charge, and people see through that really quickly. So
yeah.
I think if you're just genuine with people, it tends to work a lot better.
Were the mentors that you connected with, were they inside the company, outside? Tell us a little bit about, what kind of mentoring advice you got during those years, early years.
Yeah, so there was a lot in the company. One of the things that they did that I've always really that I've kind of taken as something I think makes a lot of sense is all the senior management kind of started how I had started, early in their career,
Mm,
moving around the company. And so they had, a lot of the senior people had been there 20 plus years, managing people for the most part.
yeah.
And so there was a ton of lessons that I learned from them about how you do that. And there were just a lot of good role models. One of the people I worked for, I've been there 25, 30 years, and he said to me early on, um, uh, you know, you really have to have the people that report to you. You actually work for them,
Mm.
and if they don't like you, you're probably not going to last very long here.
The inverted
Uh,
pyramid, right?
exactly right, exactly right. And so that was a great lesson that I've carried with me kind of through through all my experiences. Is, if I'm not facilitating success for the people that quote unquote report to me, then I'm probably not doing a very good job.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, true. There's mentors, and of course, there's also tormentors out there. Not to name any names, but was there, behavior things that you saw that says, "Oh boy, man, I'm never going to do that," and kind of remembered those lessons as you progressed in your career.
I think as a byproduct of what I was describing, where you really kind of had to prove your mettle over a long period of time and people were internally promoted, I can't think of really bad managers. And that was one of the strengths, I think, of that experience. Certainly I've seen, examples, you know, of poor management, and the things that I kind of think of as poor management is, you really berate an employee
Yeah,
over
yeah,
some kind of mistake, or instead of working collaboratively with them, and things like that. And I you know think that usually is a really, not the approach that I believe in taking. But I
right.
fortunately didn't really have any any bad situations myself.
Cool. Was it tough to leave McMaster-Carr when you did?
Yeah, I was ready for a new experience.
Mm,
One of the things that I was looking for was, so the business is, family owned, but they've got about 5,000 employees,
right.
and I felt like I was doing a great job, but I was having a hard time connecting, what I thought was good work to the bottom line performance of the business. Um, and I really wanted to make an impact, and feel like, hey, if I do a
Yeah.
good job, we're going to see this on the P&L, or it's going to make a difference. And that's what I was, looking for, and that's what ended up attracting me to what I did afterwards.
Yeah. And that was Wolf Consulting. And you became the CEO there too, right? That was your first corner office stint.
Yeah. So I ended up partnering with a previous guest. I actually just listened to your podcast with Jeff Totten.
Oh
Um,
yeah, right. Terrific. Yeah.
yeah, and so I got introduced to Jeff and was really excited about the things that Jeff was planning, and um, so agreed to work with him, and the first two companies that Jeff and Evergreen Services Group acquired were a business called Executech based in Salt Lake City,
Right.
and a company and Wolf
Mm,
Consulting based in Monroeville, Pennsylvania, about 30 minutes east of downtown Pittsburgh.
mm,
And so after the acquisition of the business, I um, there's a longer story there, but I ended up moving there with my then fiance, now wife, and first doing new business sales there, and then eventually becoming the CEO.
yeah. And what did Wolf do? Tell us a little bit about their consulting practice. Were they an Alpine company as well then at the time, or part of the Evergreen Group?
Yeah, so part of the Evergreen Group,
Yeah.
um, was backed by Alpine,
Right.
um, and so we're an IT services business serving, SMBs in largely in the greater Pittsburgh area. Now in a few other states, we've expanded geographically over the last 5 years. But we do managed services, outsourced IT for SMBs.
Right. Got it. Now, was that business rolled into Lyra or combined, or did you sell that off? How did that transition from Wolf to your current position today with Lyra?
Yeah, so I think that was really the starting point of Lyra, of what would become Lyra. So
Hmm.
we acquired that business, and then uh, I got involved with Tech Keys, which you mentioned in the introduction,
Right.
as sort of a, you know I feel uncomfortable saying chairman, but board member on behalf of Evergreen.
Right.
And then we did some additional M&A in 2020, and we kind of lifted up our heads and said, oh gosh, we have five businesses now, and that I'm supposed to be responsible for, and the work is growing, and the scale is growing, and what's our plan here? How are we going to do this? Because we want to keep growing this way, and sort of out of that moment, um, we we started Lyra and sort of created the Lyra brand as the sort of way to organize those investments.
Those other service companies. Yeah. Right.
That's right. Yeah.
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 Cool. And so did Wolf kind of become then a subsidiary of Lyra? Is that kind of the relationship today?
Yeah, so Wolf is our first of now 14 companies
Yeah.
that make up Lyra.
Super cool. That's awesome. And so today, tell us a little bit about Lyra's footprint. How many employees? Who do you serve? And a little bit more about your mission.
Yeah, so we have in the group today we have 13 uh, MSPs, similar business models to Wolf Consulting, each unique, um, but all sort of offering those IT services uh, to mostly SMB customers.
Right.
And then we have a telecom business uh, based in New York, actually. Um, and the group has I think a little north of 600 employees,
Wow.
um,
Cool.
where we're sort of spread out geographically across the Northeast, Midwest, and Eastern Canada. So sort of Toronto and East
Right.
is our geographic footprint.
Awesome. And when you talk about MSP or managed service provider, is it kind of just your outsourced IT type of work? You do your database support, IT management. Give us a little bit more depth in terms of those services.
Yeah, so we're sort of the one-stop shop for a small and medium-sized organization
Yeah.
to get their IT issues managed. So we do everything that if you're at a larger organization, you would have your sort of internal IT department. We do all those things for businesses that typically don't have their own internal IT staff. So
Yeah.
everything from day to day, help tickets. One of your employees has an issue that they need resolved, to longer term strategic planning, infrastructure management, cybersecurity,
Mm,
managing cloud implementations for businesses, things like that.
awesome. And a lot of repeat business in that model. Folks, like, I'm sure love to be able to have that outsourced for them.
Yeah, yeah. So almost all of our customers are under a recurring agreement with us.
Yeah.
So we're working with them, as a partner, really, not as necessarily just a service provider. And many of our companies have, the industry's really only been around for, we'll say, 30 years, and
Right.
many of our companies have customer relationships that go back that far. So long term partnerships.
Right. I see that you sit on a lot of boards as well. Are those mostly some of those 14 companies that you are part of your family, so to speak?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. So
Yeah.
so that's sort of, one of the things that's really unique about what we do relative to others, I think, is our businesses all are, almost all of the operational decisions are made by local management teams at each of the
Right.
businesses. They each have their own CEO and management team operating the business, and then the way that I sort of think about my role is as a board member
Yeah.
for those management teams.
Yeah. Awesome. How would you say your leadership style has evolved, Elliot, over time, from those early days at McMaster-Carr to what you're doing today?
Oh gosh, I like to think it's gotten better. I don't know if that's.
Well, I think that's
um,
fairly obvious given your roles and responsibility, but that's a good, humble response.
yeah, I like to think it's gotten better. I think that I probably have a lot more patience than I did
Mm,
early on. I think there is, an instinct to try to solve every problem today, and
yeah.
sometimes to have a little bit of a, wanting to be a perfectionist. And what I found over time is, one of the most valuable skills is to be able to ignore the right things.
Mm.
I have a
I like
friend who,
that.
yeah, I have a friend who is also in a sort of leadership management position with Evergreen, and he said, someone asked him, "What's the best advice you can give me?" And who was coming in early on, and they said, "Well, just get used to ignoring a lot of problems." Um,
All
because
right.
you have to pick your spots to really be effective. You're better
Yeah.
off putting,
Yeah.
150% into the right thing than 10% into 10 different things that could
Good
probably
counsel.
be
Very
incrementally
good counsel.
improved. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you know when it's time to micromanage or, get out of someone's sandbox?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the default for me is to really let, if we have confidence in the person, then it's cheering them on from the sidelines and
Yeah.
trying to be a, you know a thought partner when asked to be. And then, if you see something where you really feel like, you know things might be getting off track. I don't. I like to think I don't micromanage, but certainly get more involved and try to really drive to a goal.
Yeah. Company culture is so important. CEOs talk a lot about that. There's been books written about it. We talk a lot about it on the podcast. And it occurs to me with, 14, 15 growing, number of companies, many of them privately owned, many of them where you keep the team in place. How do you kind of, herd the blind cats in the night, so to speak? How do you kind of instill a company culture that's consistent across all those, those organizations?
Yeah, it's another really good question. One of the important things for us is that we're partnering with businesses that have that have cultures in place that we're excited about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously, if you're going to operate the way that we do, um, we're really, we think about what we do as building on um, legacies that have already been established. And
Yeah.
whenever I get a chance to meet an owner of a business that's considering partnering with us, you can pretty quickly imagine what the company is like based on meeting that person, because
Right. Right.
oftentimes small businesses are so much in the image of that founder or owner. um, and then we, over time, through communication and community building is a big part of what we do at Lyra, and we have conferences and facilitate communication across our companies. And I think we set a tone and a on on how we want to operate, and typically that's not all that different from the pillars of it are not all that
Yeah.
different from what already exists when we become involved with the business.
Kind of starts up front, right? You're looking for companies that kind of fit your model and fit your mold, and culture is a part of that as much as anything else.
Yeah, and we're in a service business,
Yeah. Right.
and a service business is a people business, and so and we're in a highly competitive space. We think there's 25,000 plus businesses in sort of the managed service industry in
Yeah.
North America.
Yeah.
So companies that get to the point where they're an interesting fit for us and that we're excited about partnering with, they're doing a lot of things right. And
Right.
it's hard to have a you know you got to be doing some things right culturally
Yeah.
to succeed in
Be
a competitive
successful.
industry
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Right. Right. Cool. What do you look for when you're, betting on the folks that you hire or the companies you buy?
Yeah. I think there's a few things. One is integrity and trustworthiness. It's sort of an
Mm.
obvious one, but um, it's one that we put first. It's always been, from the first time I met Jeff through today. It's something that has always been an emphasis for us is integrity and trustworthiness. So we look for that in folks, anybody that we're going to do business with, whether it's acquiring a business or hiring someone.
Right.
That's really foundational for us. I look for um, what I guess you could call grit. Um, Small business is hard. You have to get
Yeah.
your hands dirty. The other term I use for what we do is hand to hand combat. Um, if if you're someone who is more oriented towards sort of sitting in the ivory tower and um, pointing towards a problem or making a PowerPoint deck about it, that's probably not going to be effective for us.
Yeah.
You really have to go take action and get your hands dirty. So I think excitement around that is really key. And then humility. I talked about humility earlier.
Yeah.
Can't emphasize enough. One of the biggest
Right.
missteps I've seen really smart people take in their career is um, is not being able to tone down whatever ego might exist, and we all
Take
have them. But
themselves too seriously.
absolutely, yeah, it's a big it's something that I think can really make it hard for you.
Do you have a favorite interview question that you like to ask, either new hires or new prospective acquisitions?
I if there's one, it's just asking someone to tell me their story.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
and what I've found is that you learn as much about what they say as what they don't
Yeah.
from what they don't say, and
Right.
how
Right.
either how they're trying to portray themselves, or how they genuinely, hopefully how they genuinely see themselves. And I'm a big believer that sort of the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves
Yeah.
is really powerful in
Right.
what we end up doing in our outcomes. So I love to just hear people's stories and start there.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Well, Elliot, we're just about out of time. Really enjoyable conversation. We always have one last question. We always ask our guests, and that's, what kind of career and life advice you give to someone who, perhaps like yourself, has her eyes on a corner office someday.
Gosh, I heard Jeff answer this, and I couldn't agree with him more on, I feel like I'm very much in the stage of asking for advice and not giving it. So it feels sort of goofy to even try. But if I had to think of one, I think it would be to just surround yourself with the kind of people that you want to be like, and the power of that has been really powerful for me, and just find good people and spend as much time with them as possible.
Yeah, yeah. So true. Well, Elliott Hyman, CEO at Lyra Technology Group, thank you so much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
My pleasure, Brent. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.